Welcome to the Donna Seebo Show Special Editions. This program is dedicated to featuring authors and experts from around the world who will share their knowledge and insight with you. The viewing and listening audience, literacy and education are the keys to freedom, and diversity enables one to live in a world with broader perspectives. This is Donna Seebo, and I will be your host for the next hour.
Welcome to the Donna Seebo Show Special Editions. I'm so excited about this program, and I'll tell you why. It's about money. Now, I don't know about you. I have no idea what your lifestyle is like. I have no idea what your concerns are, but I will tell you what. We've got two women here that are powerhouses, and we're going to be discussing so many different aspects regarding money. This is going to be talking about debt. How many of you are experiencing all kinds of difficulties with money because of COVID? Look at how many people are going through challenges right now. Well, we're not going to be just talking about the challenges. We're going to be talking about the opportunities that you have so that you can have exactly, and I'm not exaggerating here, with a little bit of understanding, you can be financially independent, you can be solvent, and we're going to be talking about quite a bit more. I want to welcome to the program, I want to welcome Lori Sackler. This is wonderful, Lori, having you on the show. You and Frances Ram, I really am so grateful that we're having this time together. Now, I want to talk, Lori, with you first. You have put out more than one book, but the latest book that I did an interview with you about on my radio show was The M Word, the money talk every family needs to have about wealth and their financial future. Now, you yourself are a financial advisor. You are a senior vice president, family wealth director. You have a team that you work with. All of the people that you're associated with really want to empower the individuals that they come in contact with. And financial security is so important, but your background, you have certified investment management analyst, you are a certified financial planner, and you're a non-practicing certified public accountant. So when it comes to talking money, I think you can do that very, very easily. And Frances Ram, your book is Retire Debt and Retire Well. You say retire sooner, live better, be debt-free, including mortgages. Now, I have to tell you, that is a topic I just recently had a conversation about with someone. And they said, is it possible to be free from a mortgage? Yes, it is. Your background, you founded a business, Hug Your Money. You have worked with literally thousands of people. You've helped them to become debt-free. You have more than 35 years of experience as a financial coach. You've got a doctorate in finance, in insurance, risk management. I don't know when you even had time to breathe, but you have this background and all of this education. But you also have your own radio program, and you have a television show. And your radio program is Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, and your television program is The Money Doctor. And Lori, I know you also had a television show. You were the creator and former host of a radio show in New York City that was The M Word in New York City. Well, both of you ladies obviously are very, very well qualified to talk about money. And this is something that I think is extremely important. And I know when I was younger, I had no clue about money, no clue whatsoever. My family never, ever discussed money in front of me. And at the age of 17, I ended up going to work. And guess what? I wanted to move out on my own, so I had to figure some things out. I had to look at the little bit of money that I was going to be making, and I had to be able to figure out how I was going to pay rent. So what I did, I started reading. Now, I know a lot of people that are going to be watching this program, they may or may not be reading. And to me, reading is so important, and that's why I like to feature authors on the show, so that people can see what you have been willing to share in your area of expertise, your background, and your experiences. Now, I wanted, Frances, because you work with so many different perspectives, as Lori does, but I am going to ask you to give a little bit of your background, because I think your personal story about dealing with one of the ugliest situations that most people just would never in a million years want to experience. Will you share that story?
You're calling me out, Donna. Yes, yes, of course I will share the story. The idea that we talk about money, as Lori has written a book about, there's something very stigmatic about money, and people don't want to talk about it. And so when I wrote this book, the first book, which was Debt or Alive, now Retire Debt and Retire Well, when I wrote those books, it was very hard for me to share my story. As you can imagine, their first thought is, I'm a successful investment advisor. What am I going to do if people read this and say, oh, I don't want to work with her. She went the B word. She went bankrupt. So the story is that I was 23. I did the same thing many women do, or many people do. I married, I wouldn't say impulsively, but I was young and inexperienced, and it didn't turn out well, and it didn't turn out well quite quickly. However, that was enough time for my soon-to-be ex-husband to rack up $95,000 in unsecured debt, all of which I had enabled. I had gotten the credit cards. My credit was good. I thought I was being a good spouse and putting his name on the credit cards. Long story short, I ended up having no recourse then to file a bankruptcy. I even got some advice from an attorney that I wasn't so happy about later in life, which was to file a Chapter 13, which means you reorganize what you owe and you pay it off. But I was able to pay it off early. And I thought, this is the worst feeling in my gut. And I know many women share this feeling. I hear it every day. One of the worst feelings, besides losing someone you love, is that sense of fear about your money, the embarrassment, the shame, the feeling inadequate, hoping somebody else will handle it, all of that. So when it came time to write the book, which I co-wrote with another author, Eric Weld, it was determined that there was no way this book was going to press without my personal story. So I promise anyone watching this that I have been far deeper in debt than they are probably, and I know how to get out. And in doing this, you peel back that curtain and you start to say to other women and other people in general, look, I've been there. It's okay. We didn't have good role models. We don't know what to do with money coming out of the womb. We're not teaching it in the schools. So guess what? It's okay if you don't know anything about money. It's okay if what you think you know is wrong. There are other people like you who have been in this position. So, fast forward today with a company, 30 some odd years later, that helps people get out of debt and get them on their feet to retirement.
I think that is such an important story. And I can understand the feeling of embarrassment, believe me, because I've been there. I've been there myself in my own way. And it is amazing the options that you can work with. Lori, how did you get into finances? Were you born into a family that just said you're going to learn about money at the age of 3?
No, quite the contrary. I'm originally from Texas, and I grew up in a family. My dad was a doctor, my mother was a housewife, and there was no real, I could become a nurse or a teacher, basically, was the message I got. But I could also do anything that I wanted to do, which was sort of a bit of a mixed message. But my mom died when I was quite young, when I was in college. And it was like having the rug pulled out from underneath me. I found myself totally untethered and needing to find a course of action to become independent and figure things out. And so I put myself, I worked my way through business school. I had been a musician before, decided to really become financially independent and really became eager to learn. I mean, I went a little crazy. I mean, I became a CPA and I went to get my CFP and I just kept learning and learning and I kept accumulating. It became very important to me over time to help others to understand that they too can change the course of their lives. And they can become financially knowledgeable and go in the direction they want to go and create a life that they want. So that's my story. And along the way, I realized that in my family, like most families, including my clients and my personal friends and other family members, there was not a lot of conversations taking place about money. And I started to wonder, what the heck's going on here? Why is it so difficult? So I embarked on this mission of trying to figure this out. Why is it difficult? Why is it so important? So fast forward, 3 books later, I'm really trying to put the message out there, because it is hard, as Frances mentioned, to talk about money. And there's so many reasons why. But if you understand them and you examine them and you try and figure out how you can best start to change the behavior patterns of your family that can't talk about money, you can also, it's changing the whole behavior patterns across generations if you can really make that happen. And so what I'm trying to do is create a roadmap with a lot of examples and help people have productive and successful conversations about money, because the research shows there's a 70% failure rate in transferring money across generations, and breakdown in communication and trust is the main reason. And what I have found as a result, people will lose their family relationships as well as money. So we want to keep our relationships, our families intact, as well as our money. And so that's the purpose of writing these books.
I have found that, contrary to many people's opinions, sometimes men, we can talk about women because there's a Victorian attitude, I think, that still prevails, that the woman should not be concerned about money. Well, let me tell you, if you have a sick spouse, or if you have an illness in the family, or you have different things that go on, and all of a sudden you don't have any kind of a safety net, you're in the deep six and then some. And then you get so frightened that you can't think. And that is very real.
No question. I identified like 5, different parts of life, whether it's changes in financial circumstances, dealing with an aging parent, retirement, which is something Frances talks a lot about, or remarriage and merging families. All those topics need to be discussed. All the topics involved in what I call these transition points need to be discussed, and there needs to be a conversation, because there's a greater likelihood that you'll get through these transitions. You'll deal with an ailing, aging, or sick family or member or friend if you have the tools to do that, and you have the proper conversations that are necessary to do so. Yeah.
I think, and that's one of the things with the book that's so important. And Frances, this is something that you deal with just like Lori does on a regular basis. You deal with all kinds of different situations with the family and various conditions. And part of your job is also educating. What is the biggest obstacle that you have found when you first... Let's deal with a single person. Let's talk about a single person. You have a single person that comes in. They are in debt up over their head and then some, and they're in a panic. They could lose their job because of the debt situation. There's all kinds of things that can happen to people when they get into that kind of a quagmire. What is the first story that comes into your mind?
Well, I think the very first thing that comes to my mind is that Nelson Mandela quote about education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. So I think, when we talk about education, we talk about money and the fear about discussing it. It all sounds so formal. It sounds like you have to go take a course in it. And so the thing that I find as the biggest obstacle is just getting people to ask for help, to get them to realize, okay, you might be fighting with your spouse. You might be on your own, as you've said, a single person who's really struggling with one income. Whatever it is, calling somebody, calling a professional, a financial coach, an advisor, whatever, and saying, I think I need some help here. I think that's the toughest obstacle. Lori mentioned that she was a musician. I'm also a musician. And I will tell you, there are certain sectors of that we see over and over and over again who are not particularly great with money. And you can call it right brain, left brain, whatever you want to call it. Musicians happen to be one of the ones that we see a lot of. They don't make a lot of money typically. They don't manage it well. They don't care. And people in the mental health industry, interestingly enough, psychologists, counselors, a lot of people in that industry. But I've asked, what is so hard to reach out and ask for help? Why do people in the mental health industry, for instance, call us seemingly more easily? And they say because we're used to asking for help. It's not it's not so taboo. Somehow we've made money a very scary thing. I mean, Lori's title,
Yeah,
the word is perfect. It's
I was
really
gonna
scary.
I was going to say your comment about asking for help, that's part of my 5-step process,
Mhm.
and that to me is the most important step in having these money talks because they're really hard to have. And oftentimes you need an independent third party, whether it's a financial coach or an advisor or a knowledgeable friend or, even a family member who can conduct these meetings because it is a taboo, and there's a lot of reasons for it. And in any, I'm a big proponent of asking for help in almost anything I do, and certainly mental health. I mean, it's hard to kind of have a discussion about your status and your state of mental health if you don't have another person to kind of dialogue with and help you figure it out. And I believe the same thing applies to everything else, whether it's working with an accountant or a financial advisor or if whatever practitioner you need to help you manage the various aspects of your lives, asking for help. And women have a difficult time doing that sometimes.
You'd think we'd be able to be smarter because we'd have no problems talking. So why in the world are we not even going to discuss it? And I think it's that programmed sense of, well, maybe I don't know enough. I don't know the right language to use.
Mhm.
I wonder if my significant other will put me down for it. We have,
Well,
a society situations with women, different cultures. You have it. It's like, oh, I've got to save face. I can't discuss this, and it's amazing. So, wouldn't you both agree that one of the first steps is finding someone that you trust, that you can sit across
Mhm.
the table from, or just sit face to face with, and have an open conversation about this big M that is in their lives, whether they're male or female, so that they'll feel like I can breathe now. There are answers for me. Would you agree with that?
Well, I will tell you that part of the book that I focus on, or one of the topics I talk about, is the gender differences and how differently men approach money than women. Women, these, there are like over 30 studies, I'm sorry, dozens of studies in over 30 countries with 1 million participants that talk about the gender differences in our brains, how we operate. And this impacts way we talk about money decisions, how we invest, et cetera. So that becomes a barrier for women because we come at these subjects very differently. And then money is difficult for women to talk about because of what I call the evolutionary instinct. Money and sex are kind of unconsciously linked and equally uncomfortable to talk about, particularly for women. And there's an evolutionary piece to that. In prehistoric times, women would entice men, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
when men were the hunters and women were the gatherers and the childbearers, they had to depend on men for food. So sex became the form and medium of exchange. And of course, that created within our DNA a particular sensitivity over, you know, thousands of years about having these conversations about money. And particularly with men of, members of the opposite sex. So there are real reasons why we come to the table with this sort of this relative sort of fear about talking about money, dealing with money matters. And of course, the awareness of it is what's really important because that's how you get past it and then you can start to figure out how to do it and obviously get help. People like Francis are available to help with this. So, that's it, but it's important for people to have awareness and understand the why. So I
Francis,
try to help.
with you, Francis, the gender differences, and especially, when you have a couple in front of you and the woman may not feel comfortable about
Mhm.
discussing her fears or her apprehensions in front of her husband. We're talking about couples now. This is something that has to be worked with because actually, in a way, you have to be, and I know, Lori, it's the same with you, you have to be something like a counselor because you have to watch both of them and you have to create the communication so that they will grow up, and I use that word terminology deliberately, they will grow up into the understanding that it's not taboo to talk about it. We're just talking about money. But I love what Lori said about the sexual aspect too, because I think that is so
Well,
real. I see
money and
it's
sex
so
are
real.
equally uncomfortable to talk about, and there's some real reasons for it. And anyway, definitely having conversations with your, whether it's your partner or, or your husband or your spouse, at the end of the day, there are ways to have these money talks. And that's what I try and outline in the book. And debt is also a big topic that that needs to be discussed when people enter marriage. I'm sure Frances would agree. There needs to be a, disclosure, full disclosure, transparency. Here's the debt that I bring. Here's also the assets. How are we going to merge or separate our assets and liabilities? How are we going to pay for things, invest together? What are your money values? What are your goals? I mean, everyone comes with a family history also. So how are you going? And look, I saw this play out in my own family growing up. There has to be compromises on lifestyle, and people value things differently, and money is certainly central to everyone's life. So sort of navigating and negotiating all this is very important in relationships, and debt can be a really difficult piece to
Yes,
talk
it can
about.
be. It can be very difficult. Frances, would you share one of your stories with a couple that you found that were very, very uncomfortable talking about money, but they were in a critical situation? What story comes to your mind that you'd like to share?
Sure. You always love to throw these stories from the book at me, and it's been a while. So I think I will share some stories from the book, of course, if you'd like. But I think I would like to just respond to what Lori said in that, and what you asked me, which, Donna, which is, when you're talking about the gender difference, we tend to think of, well, women will have a hard time talking about this, but the men will be okay. And I will tell you, in my experience, that's not always the case. Very often, it's the men that are uncomfortable talking about it. So what I find to be the most common case with couples, and this is not, the line gets blurred, but to make it very clear, the most common case that I find with couples is that one person, very often the woman, but not always, is the steward of household finances. They're the person who goes to the mailbox, gets the bills, manages to get, the budget done. They do all the sort of bookkeeping of the household, while the other person, often the man, earns a living, turns over the paycheck and says, "You're doing a great job, honey." And that's the end of it. Until there's a stressor introduced, until a child has to go to college, somebody loses a job, there's a health problem, increase of expenses, and somehow the steward of household finances goes to the other person and says, "We need to talk." And worse than that, it's about money. And the sparks fly, and they fly because the two people are not on the same page. We don't talk to people about being on the same page, and we separate. And this is a major point that I've spent the last 15 years talking about. We separate the idea of debt and household finances from saving for retirement. So when couples, like the one in the book you're talking about, when they're in a bad situation, they're trying to dig out of a hole, it's stressful. And talking about it, money is power. I don't care how we slice it. If you're the person in the marriage that is controlling the purse strings, the other person has to ask you for money all the time. That's a power play. There's no way around that.
Very true.
And it can go either way, right? But in Lori's example, where she said, okay, you're merging your household finances, there should be some disclosure. Yes, disclosure would be great. But you have to remember that you can't just check that box and say, this is what we had when we came to the marriage, and we tied that up with a neat little bow, and now we don't have to look at it again. This open dialogue that we need of couples speaking to one another, because you're on the same team, you both want the same end result. And so unless you can talk about it like you talk about raising your children, hey, what do you think we should do with John? What do you think we should do with Lisa? You should be having the same kinds of conversation about your money, but you can't let it get heated. In my opinion, when I talk to couples about this, I'll tell them, look, this is what I want you to do. here's your homework. But if it gets to this point, you back away and you call us, right? You set up a meeting or whatever, and let us be that neutral. Because in theory, when you have saving for retirement, that's like a positive sign, right? Everybody's happy about saving for retirement. But getting out of debt, negative, not great. So you need, just what Lori said, you need a neutral in the middle who can help you pay attention to your debt, pay attention to your budget, and pay attention to your retirement. And I just want to add this one more point, and then I'll get off my little soapbox here. But the point I wanted to add is that you don't have to be in trouble to want to work with a financial advisor or a financial coach. In fact, it's much easier to climb that mountain if you start in the middle. So when we say managing debt, I don't mean most of our clients can make their minimum payments, and many are sending extra, right? They're not even delinquent on most things. There are some clients who are, and we help them, but we're just saying, look, there's a better way to do this. You don't have to carry this debt your whole life. You can free yourself of this and funnel those dollars into retirement, into passing to the next generation, as Lori was talking about, caring for your elderly parents, whatever it is that you want to do, your lifestyle in retirement. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for couples, is to just accept that, okay, this is just like anything else in our marriage, and we can't sweep it under the carpet or it's going to come back to bite us.
And that's very, very true.
Yeah, and I would just add that the whole idea, I think Frances is making, it's got to be sort of a holistic approach. I mean, you can't just isolate one piece of your personal finances and try and deal with that. It's all connected.
Yes.
So if you're going to pay off debt, how do you combine that with saving for retirement? You know, how are you going to combine, getting mom's finances in order with also paying for some of her medical bills, or figuring out how you're going to pay for college? I mean, at the end of the day, all of this is, I think, having a third party person to help you pull it all together is really important. And I was just reading recently, Northwestern came out with a study that said people who work with third party advisors actually have a higher probability and a greater success in reaching their goals. And these kind of studies have been consistently done over the years. But having a coach, having an advisor, having a third party to help navigate all the issues, consolidate them, coordinate them, deal with any conflict that comes their way, because having a third party, people can act out when you start to talk about money, right? And I think because it's a sensitive topic, but when you have a third party professional individual who's sort of, providing a safe space, an environment where people can have a dialogue and have disagreements, but resolve them amicably, that's sort of the ideal situation. And a lot of couples have a difficult time doing that because they come with different points of view from the very beginning. So, yeah.
Well, I think people in general, in the communication capacity, really often have their own paradigms. And so they will say, I cannot discuss this, or I will be looked down upon, or I will be very careful about what I say because I wonder if I will be showing my ignorance. It's amazing what we do in our mental lockdowns. And I use that term specifically because we literally will freeze ourselves because we're so afraid. We're feeling very vulnerable and
I
very, very weak.
But I will tell you one thing, which I'm optimistic about. I think the younger generation, particularly, let's start about the millennials. I mean, our millennial clients are much more savvy about the importance of having these conversations and the importance of planning. I mean, you think about it, they dealt with the parents in the Great Recession. They've seen how money can come and go. They've seen difficult times, and they're very conscientious about putting a plan together. So look, I think I talk about how age is a factor also in having talks.
Very true.
Silent generation, greatest generation, boy, forget that. Not very good at it. Baby boomers struggling, but what I see is a much more open opportunity in working with younger couples and younger individuals, that they really want to come to the table. They want to figure this out. And if it's a couple, they're much more willing to have the conversation. So I'm hopeful and optimistic about the ability of people to figure this out. Yeah.
Well, I am very optimistic myself. That's why I think this conversation about money is so important. And both of you have written some very powerful things in your books that I think anybody is going to benefit from. Frances, I know you're really big on education, as Lori is, with young people, and I'd like for you to address that, because too many times, and I know it was my case, when I was growing up, the world just, it was just, I went to school, that's all I was concerned with. If there was something where there was money needed, I would be either told, we can't afford that, or this is how much you'll get, and this is all you can spend. It was that limited. When I look back on it, it wasn't until I started to do my own reading and I started to work for, go to work, that I realized that I had to learn different things. But education in the schools, this is something that is not being done. There's not as much, I think, in my personal bias, there's not as much business community involved with schools, involved with sitting down and talking with kids. I mean, I've talked with kids that are in elementary school. They're smart. I mean, they go, okay, and you can use apples and oranges or peanuts or Hershey bars, whatever's your pleasure, as tools, but it makes a difference. And when they go shopping with mom, why is it we only look at certain things? All right, let's take a look. You've got so much money. What are you going to buy with that money? And you give them the opportunity to work with it. I talk to so many individuals that the families just are not discussing money, and they don't want to discuss hard times because they don't want the children to not know that it could be tough, that they may not be able to do their hockey games or something else. And I go, excuse me, life is a tough proposition. And if you don't learn stuff when you're young, you certainly are not going to be avoiding the learning process when you get older. Let's talk about that for a minute, Frances.
Well, it's a huge topic about education. So first, I would say that when I say I want people to be educated about finance and how to manage their money, I don't mean only children. I mean a lot of our people are in their 70s, 60s. It's never too late for you to learn how to manage your money. But certainly we lead by example. And we often will blame our parents. They didn't teach us this, they didn't teach us that, but they lived in a different economic time. So, my parents bought their house, for $13,000. I mean,
$13,000?
Yeah, even comparatively with their income, that was very affordable. Today, people will pay, so I think the statistic is you used to take you 4 years of your salary to pay off your house. Now, it could take you many, many, many years, right? So I think the idea of education is important, but I also think we have to be very careful if we're going to be successful in educating people, to make it a very warm, very accessible kind of thing. I don't tend to use a lot of financial babble. I know it sounds very impressive when we're with colleagues and we want to talk about intrinsic values of stock and all kinds of things like that. But when we're talking to the general public, if you're going to be accessible and somebody can feel okay calling you, then it just needs to be about, look, whatever you've got going on, there's no judgment here. There's no shame. I'm really proud of you for picking up the phone or filling out a form and asking for help. You're not going to feel pressure. We're going to give you this a little bit at a time. And just like anything else, you're going to learn it in a little sort of school of immersion, because it is a step at a time. And so now you've got somebody like Lori or myself who is organizing that education in a sort of syllabus, if you will, and doling it out a piece at a time. And what we find is that people get so enthusiastic as they start to get positive reinforcement. For instance, we don't ask people to build a budget. We ask them to enter data. Just enter your expenses. Keep track of them. We will help you build the budget, but you have to enter your expenses. So we give them a little homework. They do the homework. They come back. We meet. We bring them through this so they come up to speed. So the idea of education in terms of finance, you don't have to go to college for economics. And if you did, you may still not know how to balance your checkbook, because as you pointed out, we don't really teach this sort of thing in school. I'm often brought into high schools to speak in the missing piece of the program that the government put out about financial health. because it talks about all kinds of things, but it doesn't talk about debt. And when I'm there, I'm talking to 17-year-olds and usually faculty members who have come in to see the talk. And I will always ask, who knows how long it's going to take to pay off your student loans? And one person always says, forever? We're not even teaching them this at age 17 when they're choosing their colleges.
Yeah.
There's some exit counseling, which is really, I know I'm into the deeper part of education here. There's some exit counseling, but it's pretty minimal. And it's too late then. I want these kids, when they're going into college, to have a conversation like, so you want to be a social worker? Okay, you're going to live in this town? That means your starting salary is going to be $35,000. Let's see what your student loan payments will be. Gee, do you have enough left to live on, buy a car, rent a house? I mean, rent an apartment, whatever. We aren't having those conversations. And we can berate parents all we want about, you have to teach your children because they're not going to learn otherwise. But you have to make it friendly enough. You have to make it fun enough for the kids and the parents to want to learn. And that, I think, is the hard part.
Yeah, no, I think getting people interested and engaged and going through the exercise. But I will say, I speak to educational groups around the country, and there seems to be a really big push now to, for example, even my son, when he was in elementary school, he was given a project. I want you to, his teacher said, I want you to put together a trip around the world. I mean, he was 10 years old. So what did he do? He put together the budget. He actually called up, find out what the flight tickets would cost. He talked, he had a bus come and pick up his friends up. He put together, I mean, it came to almost $1 million, right? Okay. But at the end of the day, there was a dialogue. And when I speak to these, I have spoken in the past to high school teachers, because now they're introducing literacy, financial literacy, into schools around the country. And I'm speaking in a couple of weeks to a group out in California that is trying to educate parents on how to better educate their kids about money. So I'm actually hopeful, because I think all that we've been through, given the COVID crisis and all the economics regarding that, and going back to 08, 09, the Great Recession, I'm starting to see a shift. And I'm starting to see a greater kind of literacy push, as I said, to try and help kids from an early age get this and get parents on board to help. And by the way, I think Frances would agree, your kids are watching you, right? I mean, you don't have to tell them what to do. It doesn't matter. You can do one thing and say another, but they're learning by what you do. So the best way to educate your kids is to institute very sound and very logical and, I guess, patterns, behaviors of managing money that the kids can emulate. They can learn and emulate. And then along the way, they're going to pick up more skills depending on what resources out there to them. But the most important place to learn these skills early on is the family household. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that
Donna brought up.
Yeah, I think when mom, if she's a single mom, there's a single dad, or a couple, when they can have a discussion at the dinner table or in the living room, wherever it's comfortable, and say, all right, this is what we do. This is what you will need to do when you grow up. And it can be just that simple. And
you can give a kid an allowance. That is the best way to teach kids about how to manage money. You can, the Rockefeller, approach, you can save $1, spend $1, and invest $1, right? I mean, you break it down. I'm sorry, spend, invest, and give away, charity, right? So if you teach your kids a model that money can be for different things, and you become good role models and demonstrate that at home and have those conversations, Donna, that you're talking about. You could do it at the dinner table. You can talk about what things are costing. I think there's plenty of ways. I mean, I was a little obsessed with this because I grew up in a home where nothing was discussed about money.
Yes.
I mean, when my mom died, nothing was talked about, and I felt like, wow, I don't want to be that kind of parent. I sort of feel like my kids need to understand what the rules of the road are and get some skill sets. And I started by doing it myself. So that's the best way for everyone to learn. Yeah.
Money is an asset, but it's very, very flexible. And we have got credit cards. So many individuals I know, including my husband, had a very, very difficult time with credit cards, went bananas with overusing credit cards. And all of a sudden, they were in the money pit, if you will. I'll use the movie title. And it just seemed like, how are we ever going to get out of it? And Frances, your experience with bankruptcy, you were able to come out of this. A lot of people do not even know that they have options to work with bankruptcy. And this is something that I think your book gives good information on, but also I think it's important for people to know, no matter how difficult things get, that they have options that they can work with. And you've already stated, both of you, how important asking for help is. But when it comes to, let's say, processing a bankruptcy, getting help is absolutely the first step one should take, because my goodness, just yesterday I was watching something on a news program, and big companies are going bankrupt throughout the country. I mean, these are people that deal with millions or trillions of dollars. And they, because of COVID and the after effect of COVID and the cycles that they've gone through, whatever was, in the beginning, they're battling in their own way. We hear stories like this all the time. Frances, what do you like to tell people that are going through something like this?
Well, without going into how our program works, really, we're able to save people from that sort of thing most often. So it's a good thing to reach out to somebody initially, maybe who's not a bankruptcy attorney, and just ask, what are my options? Do I have other options? Now, if they're a qualified, skilled advisor, they should, when they see those danger signs that point to a bankruptcy being the best thing for you to do, they should then cut the cord and say, I need to recommend that you talk to an attorney about bankruptcy. And so what I say to people is, don't let your fear dictate your actions. Usually people think, I don't want to go bankrupt. Just like me. I mean, I felt like I was a complete failure that I had to go bankrupt. I mean, it just felt awful. I was completely embarrassed and ashamed. But I think if people can, go have a free consultation with an attorney, a bankruptcy attorney if they want, and just ask the questions. What will happen to me? I'm not an attorney, but typically people can keep their house and they're afraid they're going to lose it. They're afraid they're going to lose their retirement dollars. They're afraid they won't have a car to drive. And so it keeps them from looking at that. But the fact of the matter is, bankruptcy is designed to discharge unsecured debt. And unsecured debt is something that isn't attached to a piece of property. So we're talking about credit cards and maybe personal loans, anything that doesn't have some sort of equity or property, on the hook for it. And so in cases where people have severe amounts of credit card debt compared to their income, then a bankruptcy might be an option for them. The danger in this, for me, from my side of the story, isn't whether they file bankruptcy or not. It's whether when they come out of the bankruptcy, that has solved their problem. And this is a common occurrence. They file bankruptcy, they get rid of their credit card debt, and they say, okay, I can breathe. But nothing else has changed. Their habits haven't changed, their income hasn't changed. They may not have wiped out enough debt to make ends meet, and they start going backwards again. And now they don't have the safety net of bankruptcy for another 7 years or so. So meeting with some people, several people maybe, before you pull the trigger on a bankruptcy, I think is really, really worthwhile. But happily, I can say that part of the reason I started Hug Your Money is because I never wanted people to file bankruptcy who shouldn't be filing bankruptcy. And so with the same money that they're already spending, we organize it a certain way and we help them with a budget and we pay off that debt ahead of schedule. Our typical client, average client, is 8.3 years, including their mortgage, all their credit cards, their car, everything. That's life-changing. And along the way, we're working on a budget. They're learning.
That's
And
great.
it's easy for them to do. And that's what makes it successful. So yeah, just options, Donna, you're absolutely right about that. Whatever you think you know, you don't know what you don't know. And so call somebody else who might. And don't stop at one person. Feel free to get several opinions if you want.
Yes, that's good.
what
And
people
Lori,
do there.
what would your response be to that relative to bankruptcy?
I agree. I love the way Donna articulated that because there are options for people. Look, we are fortunate that in many states there's a homestead provision. You can keep your home and your retirement accounts, et cetera. But you don't want bankruptcy on your record, because then if you do want to borrow down the road, or you want to open a bank account, or you want to start a business, it's going to potentially interfere. So trying to figure this out before is really a great, is really important, and finding people that can do that with you, like Francis, is just critical, because there is a lot of shame. You know, if you go back and you look at the derivation of money, in Latin, I mean, it's associated with some negative stuff. So you don't want to be in a predicament where you're sacrificing, potentially losing money, and losing your financial security and stability. So definitely, the mantra here, I think, today is to ask for help, regardless of what you're going through. If it's a new marriage, or it's retirement, or it's a debt burden that you need to figure out. I mean, there are plenty of great professionals out there, and I found it a little disconcerting that there are a lot of people that are afraid to ask, and they don't want to pay a fee. They don't, clearly there are people out there that can help you on a pro bono and volunteer basis, but many professionals, and there are lots of them out there, charge a fee. I mean, we gotta pay our bills, right? But people pay doctors' fees, they pay lawyer fees, they pay a lot of fees. But sometimes when it comes to the most important, other than your health, your physical health, I think your financial health comes next. And you should be willing to invest in that financial health, and finding somebody who you can relate to, has the right chemistry and the expertise and the knowledge to deal with what issues you're dealing with, and being prepared to pay for it also, to get that expertise is important, I think. Yeah.
I would
Well, I'd like
agree.
to jump in with, sorry, Donna, I'd like to just jump in with something while it's on my mind that may not be popular, but I sort of understand why people are hesitant to reach out to advisors for help. And I think the industry in some ways has done this to itself. We're saying reach out for help. I'm going to say, if you call an advisor and you don't feel like you're getting help, if you feel like you're being, talked down to, if you feel inadequate, if you feel like you can't ask questions, if you feel like they're pushing you into a product immediately, hurry up and pay me, then I think go find another advisor.
Right.
Because as Lori said, yeah, there are plenty of good ones out there, but I think people have had some terrible experiences with this person who, took their money, never called them, didn't help them, all of that. So that should be, in my mind, your very first thought. I see this like surgery. Lori brought up, you pay for medicine and you pay for other, lawyers and things. Take the most conservative approach first, get several opinions, especially when you're thinking about something as serious as a bankruptcy. See what else is out there that might help you with your situation. And when it feels good, when it feels right to you, I mean, you have a lot of skills as an individual. You know the difference between a good used car salesman and a bad used car salesman. And I don't mean to reduce our professional.
I mean, sorry.
I don't mean to reduce our profession to that, but I think when people are shopping for an advisor, they should do exactly that. They should shop for an advisor. Find somebody you like and stick with them, and don't be afraid to pay them for their advice. Often advice is worth what you paid for it. So a free consultation, fine. But after that, people should be willing to pay for something, in my opinion, if they want qualified care, qualified help.
I think that's a good idea. Laura, what's your comment? Lori.
Well, I actually dedicate a whole chapter to finding the right advisor. I think this is the most important topic, because I deal with people who come with bias. I have someone referred to me just recently who had a terrible experience with a financial advisor. And that's difficult for my team, because they come with this sort of negative, mistrusting, what can you offer me attitude. That is totally unfortunate, right? And so I talk about all the reasons and all the attributes you need to look for, right? Trust is, I think you mentioned earlier on, Donna, finding somebody you trust. That's the primary reason people work with other people, regardless of what they're doing and what their needs are. And then, of course, finding the competency. What are the areas of expertise and experience? How do they fit? What's their ideal client? You don't want to go to somebody who's working with billions of dollars if you have a debt issue. you want to pay off credit card debt, right? So you need to align yourself with the right advisor. And I think also chemistry is really important because not only do you have to trust this person, you got to divulge a lot of information. You want to make sure you're comfortable with this individual or with this team and that they get you, they understand you, they know what questions to ask, they know how to guide you through whatever you're going through. And I think, and there's a personal chemistry, there's the feeling. I just recently went to a seminar on what elite teams look like. And the guy's a neuroscientist who talked about all the different brains we have. We just don't have the cognitive brain right here. We have a gut brain. And it's much more powerful and much stronger and much smarter. And as Frances was alluding, you know when you found a really bad used car salesman, right? You can sense it. So you have to kind of use your senses as well to figure this out. And I think it's important for people to find the right person or the right team to work with and helping with the education and solving problems, coming up with solutions and better outcomes. And if you do, the research is pretty profound that you will have success in reaching your goals, much more so than someone's trying to do it on their own.
Oh, I agree. I agree. And that was one of the most difficult lessons that I had to learn. And that was to make it okay to ask for help or to make inquiries because I didn't want to sound stupid because I had been told I was stupid. I mean, this is something, oh, no, I'm not kidding. I mean, there are those people that you will encounter, and I don't care whether they're male or female. If you say, I'm really curious about something, why did you do such and such? And they'll give you a look that makes you shrivel up like just like a little worm. And you go, oh, I guess I shouldn't have done that. You don't want to offend. After a while, you get to the point you say, if it offends you that I'm asking this question, you obviously are not the person I should be talking to because there's no such thing as a stupid question ever, as far as I'm concerned.
And the other part of that is you have to come with questions. You have to come when you interview somebody to help you, when you're asking for help, you need to be prepared and ask the right questions. So there are plenty, and of course, if somebody's talking down to you, there's a lot of research that sometimes men talk down to women, women, the research, shows that, women really want to be heard. They want somebody to understand them. And oftentimes, a male advisor doesn't necessarily have those same communication skills that a woman is looking for. So, you gotta evaluate everything and make sure you've got somebody who's not going to put you down for asking questions. There's no dumb question. There's no right answer either. It's coming with the right questions and figuring out the solutions that work best for you and no one should be feeling put down by their advisor. Otherwise, you gotta change advisors, right, Frances? Yeah.
I agree. If you're feeling patronized, leave. Just go. Just say, I'm sorry. Thank you for your time, but I'm not ready to do this yet. And if you're feeling pressured in any way, that should not happen. And I think gender aside, many financial advisors love to sling the language around so that you'll be impressed. You'll throw your hands up and say, I don't know, it's money. I don't know, I'm scared. Here, you handle it. Right. And I'm going to say you should understand everything you own, every product you own, everything you're doing should be explained to you in a way. You're not going to have a degree in it overnight, okay? But it should be explained to you in a way that you can grasp the concept about why you did this and what it will mean to you. If you're feeling like you own things you don't understand, I have this mutual fund, I have this, I don't know what to do with it. I put 50% in stocks and 50% in bonds and I'm okay. If you can't have an open conversation with your advisor and ask them, can you explain to me why I have this, what it's doing?
That's the wrong advisor, right?
Yeah, then it's the wrong advisor, exactly. You should feel comfortable asking those questions and you shouldn't be treated as though you're less than for asking them. In fact, it should be somebody who says, oh, I'm really glad you like that. You asked that question because I like to work with an educated or an interested party. I like that kind of a client.
Well, ladies,
bring for you.
I have to say, I know we could talk for a lot longer, but we're out of time. But I want to
right.
thank you both for being with me. And Lori, your book on the M word, the money talk every family needs to have about wealth and their financial future. Frances Ram, your Retire Debt and Retire Well, Retire Sooner, Live Better, Debt-Free, including mortgage. Both of you have put together publications that can be so beneficial for people. And we've only got about a minute, and I want my listeners and viewers to know, because this interview is also going to be aired on the Donna Seebo Show. And that is available, that information is all available to you on my website, delphiinternational.com. And the websites for these two ladies are going to be run at the end of the program. I want you to know that feel free to contact them and to ask them the questions that maybe you'd like to ask. But their books also are important. Literacy is something that I am a very strong supporter of. Why? Because if you don't read, you may not even know how to ask a question. It's important that with money, you understand that it's something that has a lot of flexibility to it. And you yourself can empower your life by understanding that it's not something that's meant to imprison you in fear. It is meant to liberate you so that you have the lifestyle you really want to have. And you may not want to become a millionaire, but isn't it nice when you know that your money works for you in the right way, in the right manner? Donna Seebo here. I hope you'll join me both on my radio programming as well as being able to view this television show. And again, you'll be hearing this broadcast via my programming. Check out delphiinternational.com. Remember, you're the one that is the manager of your life. Ladies, thank you so much for being with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Donna.
You have been listening to the Donna Seebo Show Special Editions. The audio version of this program will also be heard on the Donna Seebo Show radio broadcast. We are delighted you were able to join us and invite you to share this programming with your friends and family. Have a rich and fulfilling life.